I found a cow's head sitting inside a circle of candles that night, and I still don't know who put it there. If stories like this keep you up at night, hit subscribe, because this one still haunts me. This happened at my grandparents' farm back in the summer of 2018. They were away for a few nights, and I was staying behind to watch over the property, feed the animals, keep an eye on things, nothing I hadn't done 100 times before. On the last night, I was sitting in the living room watching TV when I heard a strange noise coming from outside, somewhere out in the cornfield. At first I brushed it off. Probably a deer, I figured. That was until every single cow in the barn started mooing at once. Not one or two, all of them. Out here, you learn the difference. When the whole herd panics together like that, something has startled them, and it isn't nothing. Being the only one on the property, it was on me to go check. I went to grab a coat from the closet, and just as I reached for it, I heard a cow scream, a horrible, high-pitched sound I'd never heard before. I stood frozen for a moment, my hands shaking. Something was very wrong out there. I ran upstairs to my grandfather's room. He always kept a rifle stored under his bed for emergencies like this. I loaded it and headed outside. The cows were still panicking, so I went into the barn first to check on them. At first, everything looked normal, until I counted again and realized one cow was missing from its stall. I was certain it had been tied up there just hours earlier. Then I thought I heard a high-pitched moo coming from somewhere out in the cornfield beyond the barn. As I made my way toward the field, I swore I could hear voices, people talking, low and hushed. I'd reached my limit. I fired 2 rounds into the air just to make my presence known. Everything went silent. The cows, the voices, all of it, until I heard footsteps moving through the corn. I didn't know if I had it in me to walk into that field, but I couldn't just hide inside the house while strangers were out there on my grandparents' land. So I stepped into the crops, rifle raised, and immediately heard footsteps moving alongside me, keeping pace, matching every step. Then I froze. A few feet away, down one of the rows, stood a figure dressed entirely in black. I raised the rifle and told him to get off the property. I wasn't bluffing. He didn't move an inch, so I fired another warning shot into the air. He still didn't move. Instead, he started walking toward me, arms slightly raised, as if telling me to lower my weapon. I aimed straight at him and screamed for him to stay back. That's when I realized I wasn't looking at one person. I was surrounded. 6, maybe 7 others, all dressed the same, standing silently between the rows of corn. And as the closest one stepped nearer, I saw it. He was wearing a mask, and so was every one of them. They stood completely still for a moment, silent, watching me. I have never felt fear like that in my life. Then they began chanting, low and rhythmic, in a language I couldn't understand. I didn't wait to find out what it meant. I didn't want to know what they were planning. I turned and ran as fast as I could through the rows of corn until my lungs gave out and I had to stop. I fired several more rounds behind me into the dark and finally heard footsteps and rustling stalks moving away, retreating. Whoever they were gone. I ran back toward the farmhouse, and that's when I saw it on the ground, something that stayed with me ever since. A cow's head placed in the center of a ring of candles. I was sick right there on the spot. I called the police the second I made it back inside, telling the operator everything as clearly as I could through the shaking in my voice. Then I called my parents. My dad said he'd be there within the hour. I sat upstairs in my grandfather's room crying, holding the rifle, counting every minute until I finally heard a patrol car pull into the drive. I have never been more relieved to see flashing lights in my life. The officers searched the barn and part of the field and confirmed what I'd found. A search team was called in. When my parents arrived, we all sat down with the officer and went through everything, step by step. They took me home not long after. My grandparents took it seriously enough to have a full security camera system installed across the entire property. To this day, no one knows exactly who those people were or what they were truly planning that night, and I've come to accept that some things in this world are simply better left unanswered. Looking back, I think about how close I came to walking straight into something far worse than I understood. It reminds me that there's real darkness in this world, people capable of things most of us can't imagine. But it also reminds me that protection isn't something we can fully provide for ourselves. That night, I did everything I could, and still, it was something greater than my own strength that brought me home safely. Trusting in Allah, staying alert, and never dismissing your instincts. That's what carried me through a night I'll never forget.